Okay, Papa, your first question. What is your definition of success?
I think raising successful children, and I don't necessarily mean that economically, although that's important,
Yeah.
but that they're reasonable, decent people that can survive in the society and have friends. And I just think that we're raising a lot of kids in these days that are kind of monsters and are a problem.
That's true.
So I have no complaints about the children that we raised, and that's that. That was
awesome.
a success.
So your definition of success is having successful children. I like that. And my second question for you. Tell me about your childhood. What was it like growing up for you?
Maybe that movie. I grew up well, first of all, my mother, I was born before the Second World War, just maybe almost 2 years. Mm. And when the war came along, my biological father went to England in the Navy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
And I don't know, the marriage, I don't think was all that successful. And so during the war, they divorced. Hmm. So my mother lived, just the two of us, till 1947, and I was 7 years old. And it was a struggle. She didn't make much money, and we didn't have much. Then she married a fellow in 1947 that he was an all right fellow. We never were very good friends, and we did not get along. We just didn't get along.
Which guy was that?
Robert.
Oh, the Ogburn guy. Yeah.
So, we grew up in a little town called Hemet, the Hemet area in Southern California, which in those days was a little farming town, 3,000 people maybe. It was one high school, covered a huge area. I grew up there. I remember one time we lived across the street from the police chief, and another time we lived across the street from the superintendent of schools, so you kind of knew everybody. Mm-hmm. And, there was things were so much different then. I mean, you jokingly hear you came home when the streetlights came on. That was true.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that before. Yeah.
And, summers were barefoot and stub toes and riding your bike. It was an easier life. And you didn't have television. Well, we did, but it was later on. You didn't have computers. I remember our first telephone was a crank phone. And I was about 8
a while
years
ago.
old. And then, you couldn't make long distance calls. They were too expensive. So you just, and then I had a half sister that was born in 1948.
Ruth.
Yes, Ruth. And we really didn't know each other very well because there was such an age difference. And in those days, it was just different. But I grew up kind of with a life that was really removed from the helter-skelter and craziness of most of what was going on in the world. I mean,
that's good.
I didn't.
So you had a pretty good childhood?
I had an okay childhood. There was things about that I wished had never happened, but that's beside the point. And my mother only finished the 8th grade. She didn't have much of a education, so she was a fairly simple person. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother really did a lot to raise me because she and I were pretty close. And,
oh, really? I didn't know that.
My grandmother was a wonderful woman. She could be ornery as hell if she wanted to be, but she was very good. And her husband, my grandfather died in 1948 when I was 8 years old, and I loved him. He was a really neat guy to know. He'd been a cattleman and an Indian agent and worked with Buffalo Bill, so I learned little things from him.
Which guy was that? E.W.?
No, this is E.W., yes. And so, I don't know, I really felt like I grew up fairly insulated, but on the other hand, I knew things and saw things that I wished I hadn't, but I'm not going to go into that. It was a different time. We were kind of out of the mainstream of the world, and I went all through high school there, all through to high school in that area. Went 3 years to Catholic school. I don't know. I can't complain about it, although I don't think it was the most successful childhood. I didn't learn a lot of social skills, of the big world. Then I went out on my own, and I have been on my own since I was barely 17. I graduated from high school when I was barely 17.
Really?
Yeah, I was very young. And I think my mother shoved me into school at an early age so she could have a babysitter. But I remember silly little things. Like I remember I went to a nursery school and I would take a $50, which you didn't hardly see anymore, for all day. She'd take care of us for all day for 50 cents. And
really?
Yes, I can remember going across the street from where we lived and getting a loaf of bread and a quart of milk and a penny candy for a quarter.
That's so crazy. I wish I could do that.
Yeah, but my mother was only making about 30 cents an hour.
Wow.
40 cents an hour.
Poor lady. That's nothing.
And, my mother didn't have the best life in the world, I guess.
Yeah.
But if I had to do over again, I doubt if I'd change a lot of it. Some of it maybe, but not much. But I moved away from him and have never lived there. Well, yes, I have to. We lived there for a short time after I got married, but it's just a different time. It's a different time, and it creates a different kind of person.
Yeah.
I talk to you guys sometimes, you and your brothers, about no cell phones and no computer, and
I don't think I can't even imagine.
Before we had ballpoint pens.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
You didn't have ballpoint pens?
No, you used pencils.
Dude, that's so weird.
And and
you didn't have calculators either, right? You didn't have calculators.
Hell no, you didn't have a calculator. You had a calculator that was on the end of your finger with a pencil attached to it.
Wow. I
remember one of the first calculators I ever got was about the size of a pack of cigarettes, and it only took 6 or 8 digits, I think, is all it told.
Dang.
And add, subtract, multiply, divide. That's it.
Wow. Wow.
But, and radio, I listened to the radio as a kid. We didn't have television until I was probably about, 8 years old.
Damn, we've come a long way.
And in the televisions we had, we only got 3 stations. And they went off at around midnight.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Till 1 in the morning. It was a different time, and we didn't spend a lot of time in the house sitting around playing with electrical stuff. We were out playing in the streets, stepping on our toes and skinning our knees and playing in the dirt, and different time. I mean,
a simpler time.
I rather enjoyed it, and I think the biggest thing we got going today that bothers me is that kids are isolated into machinery now, into instruments and these kind of stupid things. They're wonderful, but
making posts on Instagram like me all the time.
Yeah, and you don't really get. I mean, we were out running around, in pretty good shape,
Yeah.
And I think that's my childhood. I kind of got on my own. I've been on my own, basically supporting myself since I was 17 and a half, 18 years old.
Well, thank you for this interview. I appreciate it.
Send you a bill.